Suppose the exact answer would be not your usual academic. My background really starts, if you go back to sort of when I was very young. I was a son of a soldier. My father was a baker, and when I say a soldier, it was literally a private soldier. So I grew up in that kind of background, spent my first few years in Malaysia, so much so that the actual first language I spoke was Chinese, not even English. Which caused quite a lot of consternation for my mother, discovering that I was not speaking the same language. So after that, with moving around quite a lot, I then, because of coming from a military background, got into the military myself as a naval officer. So I joined the Royal Navy. In fact, when I joined at the age of 17, I was the youngest officer and military pilot in the British Armed Forces. So very untypical, let's say, of academia. And I actually did start teaching there, but I went on from after that to work in aviation, continuing in aviation in private airlines, and then working in South America, where we were operating with the Colombian government in the anti-drug campaign. And then after that, it was, I need to do something a little bit more conventional. My wife actually said to me, you have to get a job where people aren't trying to kill you, which I thought was good advice. So I got into teaching. So yeah, definitely not your usual background. Something of an adventurer, really. I've operated companies all over the world, something like 13 companies in 6 countries and 3 continents. Operated a diamond mine in Ghana, for example. So again, not typical. But I think this is a good thing. It gives me a much sort of wider vision of the world, which I think is something very positive to bring to Swiss School of Business Research, especially with the fact that we have such an international student body. I've been teaching, really, I first started when I was in the military. I was 17 when I joined the military, and at 18, in between doing other things, of doing my basic career and doing the training that I was getting, I was also started teaching, which was mathematics initially and then seamanship. So I started teaching literally at 19 years old. I was teaching people, the students were 16, 17 years old. Some of them, where it was senior ratings, trying to become, getting a higher qualification to get promotion, were actually nearly 40 years old. So they had the experience of being taught to them by a 19-year-old naval officer, which was quite a challenge really, but teaching mathematics and seamanship. So I started then and enjoyed that. And again, when I was working in Colombia, we had an awful lot of downtime when we weren't sort of trying to destroy the cocaine industry over there. So I found myself teaching again to the soldiers and staff of the base. So again, military style, but it was still quite interesting type of teaching. I sort of call it more, it was teaching in kind of a place you wouldn't expect to teach, in an airport in the middle of the jungle. So quite extreme teaching, I would call that. So quite a long time, really. I got really into teaching for something extra to do, but quite honestly, I enjoyed it so much. As I say, that when I first started teaching, I was very young and teaching people much older than myself, but it showed that I still had something to sort of impart. And later on, as time went by, when the roles were somewhat reversed, and I was the one with a lot of experience, teaching people with no experience, especially in business, which I've been involved in for a long time. It was very satisfying to do that and to use the experience that I have had to show people and help them, so that really they didn't have to go through a lot of the problems that I'd gone through, and to share that experience with them, which I felt was very beneficial for them. So I really did enjoy doing it and felt it was something that I should be doing. One of the main reasons for starting SSBR in the first place was at the time of the pandemic. I was working in many universities and business schools in Europe, and I was acutely aware of what I felt was an unjust way that they were treating the students. And when the pandemic hit, especially when it now meant that students couldn't just fly out to another country anymore, that most of these schools and universities were certainly not prepared to be able to deal with that and go online and be able to deal with students literally throughout the world in different time zones. And I was certain that I'd had the experience and the knowledge to bring that to those students, and felt that I could do a much better job than a lot of the other universities were doing at the time. So it kind of forced me, because of COVID, to actually make sure that we could get something that would be useful to those students in those conditions. Obviously, I had no idea how long COVID was going to last, but I was determined that we could set up something that was very useful for people who aren't in a position to travel throughout the world quite easily, but still get a really good education. SSBR is different from a lot of the other places that I've already worked at, in the sense that I feel our core point of what we focus on is the actual student. I found that I've probably worked in about 20 other universities and business schools throughout Europe, and I found that they seem to be very much based on, we are the school and it's up to you to conform to us. And I really don't agree with that. I think it should be the other way around. We should be more student focused. In fact, I'll even call them customers. And it tends to be seen in a bad light in an educational setting, that treating students as customers, but I don't think that's right. I think that they are customers, and therefore we have to serve those customers, and we have to understand that they are the important factor here, not the fact of a massive rules and regulations that we can't bend, especially because of something like the pandemic that we're in. Things have changed now. We're not in a position where we can say you have to be here at a particular time for so long. We can't. We have to understand that people have problems. People have their work, their family. People are getting sick. Members of their family are dying. They're not necessarily in a position to stick to a regimented, authoritarian type of classwork. So I feel that we're so different because we are flexible. We understand the student. We are prepared to bend the ways that we do things for the student and treat the student as a customer, because that's important to us. We have to remember that we are customer focused, and our customers are our students. One of its core concepts is flexibility. And by that I mean in terms of, as I stated previously, that we would focus more on the requirements of the students. So, for example, in most universities, there are very fixed start times of semesters. So somebody necessarily who wants to start as soon as possible possibly has to wait 6 months or even a year before they can start. And quite honestly, with what's happening now, we can't be sure of what's going to happen in the world within the next couple of weeks. Certainly not that. So we have flexible start dates to accommodate that. Also, somebody decides that they want to start now because they've now made the decision. We can accept that. We can get them into the course immediately. We're also flexible in terms of how they actually study. So instead of having to appear in a class at a particular time or date, especially considering that we are international, so obviously we have students in time zones throughout the world. So it's not really practical to have a fixed time. If we said, well, we have a class at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Zurich, it might be 1 a.m. in their country if they're in Myanmar or Thailand. So it's not practical. But again, we're flexible to accommodate that. Moving any connections with the professors around for different time zones. So again, flexibility built into the actual coursework. Accepting that maybe on a particular course that they don't necessarily have to do them in a specific order that we have decided. If you decide that you want to do the marketing one first, you can do that. So again, flexibility in how you actually do your studying and present your work. And I think this is hugely important because of this, because people have their own lives, especially someone doing a master or someone doing a doctorate. They have their businesses to run, they have their jobs. We've got to fit around their schedule, not the other way around. So I think because of that flexibility, that separates us from so many other places where they have these rules and regulations tied that you have to do it to this. And we understand that things happen, that maybe they can't get a presentation in on time. Again, not a problem, we can work around that. So again, flexibility is one of our core concepts. When it came to founding the school, Swiss School of Business Research, I was very careful about coming up with an appropriate name. I didn't just want to sort of say something that was maybe indicative of we are global or something like that, which is could have gone the easy route. Obviously, because we are based in Switzerland, we have the accreditation from Switzerland, very definitely appealing to the Swiss quality standards. Swiss had to be in the name. Again, school, because we're not a university and don't claim to be, we're a business school. So obviously we have Swiss, school and business in there, but we wanted to be very focused on research. The reason is that we feel it's an important aspect of any kind of study, especially higher education, rather than just us having to dictate classes of previously prepared material, which obviously we have, but we wanted the students to do their own research. We wanted to get them to study their own business, to study their own industry. And this is part of the actual benefit, I believe, of working with us, because it's developing work on your industry and your business. So research really, again, is one of the other core points that we have. Therefore, it had to be in the name. So kind of with what we are doing dictated the name of the school. So it was Swiss because we're in Switzerland, a school, not a university. Business is our main focus, and research is one of the core methodologies that we have for teaching. So it had to be that name, really. Almost couldn't be anything else. Research plays a big role in the students' studies, especially considering that we're online. If we had just sort of an exam-based methodology, it wouldn't really work, because obviously there's the opportunities to sort of distort those kind of things by working at a distance. So with doing research, what we do, even starting at the bachelor level, we have the assignments that the student is required to do, and the theses and dissertations that the students do are even at bachelor level, where they have to do this, where they have to provide a project or a business plan and do their research at that level, taking it all the way through, going up to master's level and then doctorate. So really, one of the core methodologies of going through to gain our degrees is through research, where students do their own student-led research. And by that I mean that they are working specifically within their own industries that they know, so that they can develop ideas that will benefit their particular industry or their particular company. So I think it's very important that we have this. It's the student deciding the kind of research that they want to do. So it's vitally important to us to have that. And I think this gives us a lot of benefits in terms that we have students in different parts of the world, in different industries, doing their own research based on their own industries, which is giving great benefit to their own industries as a whole across the world. When we're looking at taking on new professors, obviously one of the things that we always need, we need that they have their minimum qualifications and experience. But I think one of the important things that we look for in our professors is that they have the experience and the methodology to bring that out and show their experience. Because I think this is very important with dealing, especially in an online scenario, is getting the experience of the professors who have been working in industry, working in businesses, that they can get that experience across to the student. So we do like to have something of a bit of charisma in there as well, because otherwise it just finds yourself that someone who's just effectively reading PowerPoint presentations. Well, quite honestly, the students can read their own PowerPoint presentations. So we need someone who is in a position that in an interesting method can actually get the information across, give them the benefit of their experience, which I think is very important for the students to have, more than just the information that's on the presentation. And this is one of the things that I've always done when I've been teaching, is putting a lot of my personal stories, if you like, when getting the information across. which is an interesting point because people remember more stories. If you think about a book that someone has read, if you've read two books, a textbook and let's say, I don't know, a Harry Potter one, you ask that student a week later about the textbook, they will be hard pressed to remember a few of the titles. But you ask them about the Harry Potter book that they've read, which is story-based, they will remember the names of the main protagonists. They will remember who they are, what they did, how they did things. They will remember so much more. So again, if you have a professor who's interesting with the experience and can get that across in a charismatic, interesting way, the student will remember so much more and will learn more. I think one of the great advantages that we have at SSBR, we have now, I believe, over 65 different nationalities of our students. So within a couple of hundred students, 65 different countries are represented. Within the faculty, I think we have 12 different nationalities. And I think this is very important because we have an international student body and an international faculty. Then we have ideas and knowledge that literally cover the world. And I firmly believe that even as far as the faculty is concerned, we should always be learning from the students as well. Because we have the information of how things work in their countries, in their particular time, especially under the current circumstances. An example is that we have, for example, students from Russia and the Ukraine. So, and I think this is a great thing of showing that education can be global and that we can get ideas across to everybody throughout the world. So I think it's hugely important, and I'm so pleased when we get a new nationality from somewhere. We have a student from Samoa, and that is really gratifying that we have students from as far away as Samoa, from Australia, from Russia, from the Middle East, from the Far East. And I find that so gratifying that we have reached people throughout the world who want to come and work with us. Our main mission that we have stated is Swiss quality education for all. And we're quite serious about that. We wanted to have quality education, and because we're accredited through Switzerland, but they have a high quality standards. I think Swiss education is considered to be something like number 3 or 4 in the world after, say, the UK, the US, I think Germany is third, it might be Japan, and then Switzerland. So we wanted to have high quality education, and Swiss gives us that. But we wanted to make this accessible to everybody that possibly could. We're not obviously saying that we're going to give the education away, but we wanted to make it so that it was accessible to as many people as possible, in as many countries as possible. Accreditations is a much spoken about concept, certainly within higher education. We accept that accreditation is important at SSBR. So much so that at the moment we have our accreditation in Switzerland and are now looking at getting accredited through other agencies throughout the UK and Europe and the United States. But really, accreditation is just sort of a confirmation by a third party, really, that you have come up to certain standards. And this was why when we started with the Swiss quality education, where we came up to Swiss standards of education. But really, these things are based on so much more of paperwork, quite honestly, that it's a requirement of having every kind of learning outcome and program that you have and how they fit in and what they should be doing. It's a quality standard. Now, we agree in having quality standards, but in a lot of cases, this gives us a lot of restrictions on how we can actually work with our students. We want to be flexible so that we can offer more programs, and getting the accreditation for that is very restrictive. But it is important, so we're aware of that, and we are getting on more and more accreditations as we're going. And this is, now we're in a much better position for that, because now the accreditation agencies can see that we are offering the actual quality standards that we say we're offering. So it's now becoming much easier. And it's kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation with this, where you need to be accredited to give the education, but you need the accreditation agency to know that you've been doing it in the first place. So an accreditation doesn't guarantee any quality, but what it does, it shows to the world that you have attained a particular standard by somebody else's opinion of what education should be. So yeah, it's very important indeed, and we are dedicated to increasing our different accreditations and getting as many as possible. Another question we get asked quite a lot at SSBR is, why are we not a university? Or indeed, are you a university? No, we're not. We are not a university. We're a private business school. Now, this means that we can give higher education, but certainly more on our terms. With the case of universities, especially more traditional universities that have programs that have been developed literally over hundreds of years in some cases, they're incredibly rigid. They have to, for them to be able to change a program, introduce a new program, work around different methodologies can take literally years. So one of the reasons why we haven't really gone down the route of setting up as a university per se is to avoid these kind of restrictions. And we think we're much more innovative and flexible than a university is. And we know that is the case because so many universities have restrictions of taking on students, how they have to behave, the kind of rules and regulations that they have. And we did not want to get stuck into that. We want to be based more on providing the education for the student, but more for the student's requirements so that we can work around and be more flexible for the student. And by being a university, that would not be possible. I think the fact that we're not a university benefits the students in many ways. It gives them the opportunity to do a program that is flexible. It's more based on them. It's more student-led rather than coming from an institution with lots of history and regulations. It's not. It gives them the opportunity to work on their own kind of research. As I say, we are research-led by the students, and this is very important. So it gives the student the opportunity to work from their own kind of schedule, on their own kind of material that a regular university probably wouldn't accept, and it would have to conform to particular norms that they have, which are probably very outdated. So by not being a university, they get the opportunity to get a more innovative, up-to-date, actualized kind of program that is more suitable for them and their field and their industry. I think SSBR helps students accelerate their career in many ways because it's focused on the research of the student and the field that they're interested in or they're working in. In other words, someone can produce work that will benefit them in their own industry. Rather than, as I say, if they'd gone to another school where they have to follow particular examples that have been there for decades, they're working on something that is very specific to their own background, their own industry. And this is of great benefit to them because it's working with that and their own companies, which will give them much more opportunity to develop themselves within their own industry. And the employees or their companies or their industries are going to appreciate that. And this is going to come back to them in terms of either higher salary, promotions. But if we have people who are already in a good position in a business, it's going to help them develop their own business or their own company. So I think it will very much help them specific to them in their industry, that you wouldn't get that if they were just doing a sort of cookie cutter kind of program in another university. I think one of the other benefits that if someone does a PhD with SSBR, we were talking about the benefits, and obviously there's the more tangible ones of income or promotions, but there's also this effect of status that somebody can have. In many cases, we have students who come to us who are CEOs of companies. And we have some who are in pharmaceutical companies. So obviously working with a lot of scientists and medical practitioners who are doctors. But it's generally considered that because they're working with scientists or medical staff who are the doctors, that the CEO, who actually has a vast amount of knowledge in the industry, but is still only considered something less because he's not a doctor. So we have students coming to us specifically to sort of effectively fill that gap, where they can then become equal to their peers, not in the same field, but certainly in business or management, and they now too are doctors. And I think it's worth a small history lesson. People tend to say that if someone has a PhD, they're not a real doctor, but it's actually the other way around. The PhD type of professorial doctor has been going around for somewhere between 500 and 700 years, whereas the medical practitioner has only been called a doctor for just over 200 years. So quite honestly, and I know it's somewhat controversial to say this, but it's the PhDs are the real doctors. One of the reasons for this is that they have to produce something new. They've got to produce new concepts within their industry. Medical doctor merely learns what has already been known and just has to remember stuff rote of what has been studied by other people to become a medical doctor. So arguably, the real doctors are the PhDs. We've spoke mostly about masters and doctorates, but also at SSBR we do bachelor's degrees. And I think this is very important for those students who don't have the necessary background or knowledge to go into a business field, and they're going into a company where maybe they don't have knowledge about that. So I think it's very important that if they do their bachelor's with us, they're going to get very experienced professors who've worked in industry, who are going to help them actually understand their industry that they're going to work in, the working environment they're going into, and help them really establish themselves very quickly into any companies that they join afterwards. Especially as we said that it's based a lot around them doing their own practice, their own research into their own particular industry or field that they're interested in going into. It means that by the time they finish their degree with us, their bachelor's degree, they're in a much better position to enter the workforce at any level within that kind of their industry. They have a more deeper understanding of industry, a better understanding of how to work with others, about management and leadership. So I think it's very important as well for bachelors, not just for masters and doctorates. We decided to accept cryptocurrencies, and we can accept up to 30 different types of cryptocurrencies. And there was a very specific reason for this, because one of the things that we just stated about having Swiss education open to all, or certainly as many people as possible, that we've noticed that there's certain countries where there are currency restrictions, where literally for someone in that country, they're not in a position to be able to pay for a course in Switzerland, or certainly outside of their own country. And there are very difficult and restrictive laws for them to pass money out of their country for that. So literally for those people, they would be excluded. But thanks to cryptocurrency, this now means that we can include far more people in other countries that wouldn't normally have access to that. And we also feel that this fits in with us being flexible and also being more innovative. I think at the moment there are only 5 universities on the planet that accept cryptocurrency, and we're going to be the 6th. So I think that shows that we're understanding the customer again and focused on them and how we can actually help them and give them access to Swiss education.